Welcome to another episode of No Investment Advice. We got our man Trung Phan here, lead writer at Hustle, and we got Jack Butcher, founder of Visualize Value. What's happening, boys?
Bro, by the way, another Elon reply guy.
What,
just
again?
as we did last week, we talked about reply guy Elon. He found a tweet of mine from April 20th, 420.
Add it to the deck, mate.
Dude, adding it to the deck. He did a smile, the smiling, crying face. It was a tweet I did about Mark Zuckerberg. We should actually pull it up.
The one about the Winklevoss twins in the ear?
Oh, yeah, dude. Hold on.
How do you think he's found
I'm going to pull this up because it's one of my underrated tweets, in my opinion. It was sitting in the weeds, and Elon found it. I have no idea how. And I know Elon and...
oh, wait. This is the one he went down the rabbit hole, right? And it was a 2 month old...
Well, this is where people are laughing because this tweet is like 3 months old. Hold on a second. Can you give me a screen share? Because we can laugh about this.
I think you got it. I think it's... Oh, wait.
I mean, the listeners can have a laugh. If you didn't listen... All right, if you didn't listen to last week's episode, we're talking about how Elon is officially my reply guy. Because once you have 5 interactions with somebody...
I hope he listens to this.
All right, it looks like I can't screen share, but I'll tell you what the context of the tweet, because I just think it's funny. Obviously, I'm pumping my own tires here, but who cares? So in 2004, there's an IM, instant message transcript, between Mark Zuckerberg and some of his classmates about how he was going to screw the Winklevoss twins. So this is the exact text of that conversation. It all came out from the case where the Winklevoss sued Mark Zuckerberg. So Zuck's friend goes, "So have you decided what you're going to do about the website?" Referring to basically the website that the Winklevoss had asked him to make. I think it was called
Facebook. Oh, it was before the Facebook. Yeah.
Before the Facebook. And then Zuck goes, "Yeah, I'm going to fuck them. Probably in the year. Correction, ear. I'm going to fuck them in the ear." Bro, you can't even be mad at the
You can't make that up. You can't make that up.
19. I'm still writing some crazy shit in my DMs, and this guy was writing that at 19.
Yeah, you said worse than that in our Telegram group, man.
Yeah, dude, exactly, bro. Anyways, Elon has actually had a beef with Zuck going back a few years. He doesn't like Facebook. He's written delete Facebook on Twitter a few times, and then he just his other one that's really funny is Zuckerberg had a comment about artificial intelligence, and Elon just goes, "I actually talked to Mark about it. His knowledge about the subject is very limited." So this dude's got beef with like everyone, and he's chirping at Zuck.
He's trying to be number one, man.
He found this tweet and did the smiley face. So there you go, man.
That's it. Official reply, guys. Someone update the counter. All right, boys. So today we're going to be chatting about, to give people a sense, we're going to be talking about Nas The Investor. So the famous rapper, my favorite rapper of all time, Nasir Jones. He's been killing it in the investing game. Is he actually your
favorite rapper?
He's literally, I listen to him every day for like 5.
Oh my God, keep telling people what they're gonna hear, because I'm still cutting. All right,
let's do that. We'll come back to Nas though. But he's made a bunch of money on Robinhood and Coinbase. We're gonna break that down and talk about that. Then we're going to do a little bit on Google. A lot of people have been talking about it being the greatest business of all time, or the Google search businesses. Druckenmiller said that to you as well. We're going to do a bit of a breakdown there on YouTube. You're going to grill me a bit on that world. And then we got Jack's Edge of the Internet stuff. He's going to be sharing some experiments he's been running and some stuff he's been finding. And after that, if we got time, there's a few bonus sections, but we'll see how we are. So should we kick off with Nas? Because this is really interesting. Yes. Do you want to give people an understanding of like what he's been doing in investing?
Okay, well, I'm gonna frame him as an investor. Then I'm gonna ask you immediately, because I want you to pump him up. I had no idea he was your favorite rapper. This is huge, right? So you get to man crush on Nas for a little bit. Wait, hold on, Jack. Do you like Nas? Or whatever.
Yeah, I can't call myself like a full-on connoisseur, but I respect the man.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not like an encyclopedia of Nas, but he's one of my favorites, if not my favorite.
Okay. So Nas was one of the biggest rappers from Queens, New York in the mid-90s. His first album, Illmatic, is incredible. It's actually one of the first albums I ever bought. Incredible.
Yeah, a lot of people say it's the best hip-hop album of all time. A lot of people say that.
Dude, hold on your man crush, buddy. I'm going to give you a chance to crush on this guy.
Let's go.
All right. So Nas has invested in 188 tech companies over the past decade or so. I think he might be the best celebrity investor in the world right now, actually, better than Ashton Kutcher. at the very moment, because this year, as you mentioned, he had 2 public listings, Coinbase and Robinhood. So I don't know if you guys read Dan Runchi's email, Trapital, incredible. He actually commented on a video about Indify, which Jack spoke about a couple.
Oh yeah, I remember
ago.
that.
Indify, the startup that is helping investors invest into individual songs. But TLDR, he writes about the business of hip hop. Trapital.co, incredible newsletter. If you've never read it or are not subscribed, I highly recommend you subscribe to it. But he wrote a rundown of Nas's investing career. So 188 startups, including Lyft, Dropbox, Casper, PillPack, all these have had billion-dollar exits. And the way Nas actually got into it, and I'm bringing this up because Jack has mentioned this in the past and in our chats, is like something that's going on with the NFT and Web3 movement is that you're seeing how undervalued culture is, right? Like Jack, you bring this up, it's like it's demonstrating the money that people are willing to pay for these quote unquote NFTs. Listen, a lot of it's published, but it's also indicating that culture has been extremely undervalued, right? There's not been a great way to monetize it. But what I love about Nas's story,
the people who are actually creating the product,
right?
There's plenty of people making money off culture, but not the people that are making the stuff typically.
Okay, good, very good clarification. Right? Yeah. People are getting paid, but now there's an opportunity for the actual creators to get paid, and so Nas he used his cultural clout in an interesting way, right? It's like he is very good friends with Ben Horowitz, the partner at Andreessen Horowitz. And I believe his venture firm is called Queensbridge Venture Partners or something along those lines. And there's no question, Ben Horowitz has been helping him become a great investor. A lot of his good investments coincide with the investments that Andreessen have made. But having said that, man, like, there are a lot of people, a lot of celebrities, a lot of money, and a lot of people cutting checks. And he was cutting checks to Coinbase in 2013 when it was worth $100 million, and to Robinhood in 2014, I believe, in the Series A when it was worth about $150 million. But these were not home run bets at all, right? And he's cutting $100,000 to $500,000 checks. So I tweeted this out saying that he had gone into Robinhood at 20 cents a share and is trading around $36, $38 today. So 200x. Let's just call it a 500K check. That's $100 million. Coinbase, same deal. He got about 100 mil. If you look at, even through dilution, his kind of paper gains on that. And now, before Bilal crushes on Nas to explain how big of a legend this guy is, I just want to talk about the comments that I've been getting on Twitter. This tweet, they are so idiotic. It's just, I mean, we know this, and Jack actually mentioned to me before this chat, it's like, you got to mute all notifications from people that aren't your friends, right? Or your followers. It's just like, the thing I realized about Twitter is the part that actually pisses me off when I engage with kind of these anonymous accounts is not that their initial comment, is me commenting on it, and then now you're waiting for them to reply, right? So that actually starts eating on your brain. So the initial comment triggers me. But the way it gets really bad is if I comment on their comment and now I'm waiting for them to reply, right? Because if it takes them 20, 30 minutes to reply and I'm just sitting there, they just took 20, 30 minutes of my life. So I'm like using every ounce of self-control not to reply to these idiots. But I've got basically 3 flavors of comments. First comment is, and this first one's not even wrong. It's like, hey, the average retail person doesn't get these deals. Fair enough. You're right. You did it. But the average retail person obviously wasn't also as talented as Nas to build himself into the greatest rapper ever, right? This guy, it's not like he was getting these deals because he was born into it. He was an incredibly talented dude who might have created the greatest rap album ever and earned the cultural clout to be asked to do this. Number 2 is that's not his fault that he's getting these deals. The SEC is the one that creates these rules. And there's a lot of talk about, people should be allowed to angel invest, and that is changing. AngelList is really helping along those lines. And I know that they're trying to push people and the SEC to allow more people to invest. I think a way to frame it is like, people can invest in fucking dog shit coin and not have to be accredited, right? Yeah. It's like they should be to be able to invest in startups, is allowed to do that.
I don't know what these marketplaces are, but like Republic and things of that nature, like you can raise 5 million from unaccredited investors now, and there are platforms popping up. So it's going to change. Exactly,
right? So I that flavor of comment, I'm kind of okay with. The second flavor of comment was along the lines of what makes these guys such good investors, right? They're just celebrities that got early access. I'm like, dude, trust me, a lot of rich celebrities have eaten a lot of shit, right? Like you don't have to Google very far to see. Just Google like awful celebrity investments, and you'll find a lot of them. So I mean, there still is a bit of like, I mean, he's invested 188 startups, right? He's really thinking like a venture capitalist. You got to give this guy credit where credit is due. And then the last one is just straight up racist shit, man. Like, that's just straight up racist shit.
That's ridiculous.
It's like one comment is like, oh, these guys are complaining that they're being oppressed and they're getting these opportunities. I'm like, bro, are you kidding me? And then I clicked on the guy's profile, and sure enough, it was like, put Hillary Clinton in jail was like his hashtag. So
oh boy,
that was pretty consistent. So anyways, to summarize, Nas is killing it as an investor, has had a crazy year, and Robinhood, his latest kind of win, is probably another $100 million victory for him. And you know what? He's a great investor. So let's rewind, though, 25 years or so to the mid-1990s. Bilal, you are in New York City, where Nas is from. Tell me how big of a legend. Tell our listeners how big of a legend Nas is.
Yeah, well, so I lived in London, obviously, back then. Nowadays, I'm in New York. But yeah, I guess for me, the type of music I loved growing up was, I mostly listened to hip hop, but it was all about the lyricism. And obviously, he's like one of the best, if not the best for that. There's like Biggie, Jay Z, and a few others. But man, yeah, it's just incredible, like raw, like the early stuff was so raw. And then over time, he just grew. And that's kind of like my favorite sort of artist. Like one of my other favorite artists from the UK that Jack and I both like is Kano. And he's the same. Like he was this raw guy, 18 years old, coming up the blocks. And then now you see his stuff. He's got like an orchestra on stage in the Royal Albert Hall, and he still crushes that. So they're the sort of people I like. But yeah, man, Illmatic, Stillmatic, It Was Written. I literally listen to that every day on the way to school for like 5 to 7 years, probably.
Wait to the post office, right, Bilal?
Yeah, on the way to the post office, because I was selling hats, and I would drop them off thinking I was like, no, I'm 16 years old. So I was like, you know, that on Illmatic, what is it? The world is yours. Like this super
but the world is yours is
shit.
the second It Was Written.
It was written. All right, yeah, okay. But yeah, so what were you about to say, Trung?
No, we got to talk about your hats, man. Tell the listeners more about your entrepreneurial venture selling hats while listening to Nas.
No, it was, yeah. I mean, I was 16, so I was selling stuff on the internet and in the playground. But it would be, I would take.
What year is this, man? You're making e-commerce stores before.
Yeah. It was 2004. 2004. So there was no Shopify. I don't think it was OS Commerce, open source commerce, and because I was just kind of poor, so I just got everything that was free. OS Commerce was like WordPress of e-commerce.
Can we do a Wayback Machine screen share?
Probably.
Can you do it?
Oh my God, it is embarrassing.
How about this? When we finally get this merch thing going, I know we keep talking about it. Can we do some of the old hats that Bilal used to sell?
Oh, that's great.
That would be funny. Do you know what? The one that was really popular, talking of hip hop, was a Compton hat, which I'd never been to Compton. It was hilarious because now I've been like a bunch of times because my girlfriend lived. Well, I've driven through it, and my girlfriend grew up in LA, and so like we go there all the time. And so it was just like Long Beach and Compton. Long Beach was Snoop Dogg's hat, the one he would wear, and then Eazy-E used to wear Compton hat, and I used to import it from the States. So it's $2 to a pound. So I remember the numbers. It was like £2, £3 to buy, and then I would sell them for like £14. And then sometimes people in the States will be buying from me, and it didn't make any sense. I was like, why is someone paying $32 to buy this? So yeah,
dude,
man.
How brutal is that? I remember I used to do eBay shit, and shipping is just the funniest, right? It's like you gotta.
Well, you make your margin, man.
Yeah, you got shipping.
What did you sell on eBay? What did you sell?
Dude, it's like we talked about this, but I was using my old man's credit card to buy shoes, right? And like shoes and basketball jerseys. And man, Dr. Cat fan rolling home and like seeing his credit card bill. I was like, wait, what's that? 5,000 on eBay?
You were like early hype beast selling, yeah? Like
it was
sneaker
I didn't
culture
make any
life?
money. I didn't make any money. I actually spent you guys will laugh because my physique does not represent it, but I was spending G's on bodybuilding.com, man. I have tried every supplement. I was taking something called Animal Pack. Have you ever heard of it?
I've had that. I've taken that before.
Bro, dude, the pills the Animal Pack did, Bilal, I don't know if you know what this is, but like
It's one of those supplements. Yeah, it's like
no, it's not even. It was daily vitamin packs. There's like 30 vitamins a day, and they're prepackaged. I mean, first of all, I gotta ask Jack why he was taking it, but like they were like horse tranquilizers. Like the vitamin was this big. I didn't put on a single pound of muscle. I probably added fat though. But like, I'll tell you the one thing that really hyped me up was hydroxycut. You ever use that stuff?
No, I've heard of it. It's like fat burn and stuff.
I think this is a business in the making, Trung. We got some supplement business on the way.
Man, people make billions selling this stuff, right? All it is like it's just souped up. Was it caffeine basically? Right? Just get you.
Yeah. Like the pre-workout stuff is basically caffeine.
Exactly. But wait, Jack, you did Animal Pack?
Yeah, man. I lived with this group of lads my last couple of years at university. One of them was on a rugby team, and it was like he'd bring this stuff home, and he worked at the GNC in Cardiff, so you get all the free samples and stuff. So then we get on the
little creatine
for a few
life.
Months.
Bro, did you ever?
I got in shape from that stuff, but it was like I used to get nosebleeds, all sorts of stuff. It's not good for you.
What the hell was in there, man?
Dude, it's totally worth it though, and that's so funny that it was GNC, man. Yeah, GNC here. I had buddies that worked at GNC. They did bring home stuff like Russian Bear 5000. It's like this protein mix that had 5,000 calories a serving.
Yeah, man, I got some funny stories about all that along those lines. Just
that's funny. Wait, how did we even start talking about supplements, bro? Oh yeah.
You would be selling or buying on the internet? Yeah.
So, anyways, man,
I'm sure there are a few other things you were buying at that age. Teenage Trung on a hype.
Yeah, man. Well, like I said, man, I'd be walking around school looking for people wearing flower shirts and seeing what they're selling.
I wasn't even saying that, but yeah, I'm sure you were wild child, Trung. All right, but was there anything else on Nas? Because I mean, I think the one thing I'll say is it ties in with some of the previous stuff we've talked about with Jay Z, what he's doing in the culture, meeting, investing stuff. And it's cool to see like people like them, these rappers who back in the day would have just been someone who'd hold up a bottle of Ciroc and say, hey, buy Ciroc. And now it's like Diddy owns a big part of Ciroc or whatever. And same with Jay Z, he like sold that brand recently. So yeah, man, that's the way forward. It's all the same stuff we've been talking about for months.
Why don't we? Well, Jack, I love just from your creator dude here. Everything you're seeing these guys. What do you think when you see Nas making cheddar on these IPOs? Like, what are you thinking? You're like, man, that's just the wave, man. Like, this is just it's turning.
Yeah. I think it's like maybe it's just like the changing of the guard in some ways. Like it's really, really hard to gatekeep a lot of this stuff now. And it's interesting. You read through those comments, like people assume that the people making the savviest investments are like people working in an office block in New York. But what really makes sense is like somebody who can shape, mold, understand culture. Like that really is the vehicle that makes any investment successful, right? Like 50 Cent, Vitamin Water is another example. It's like these people are institutions that actually have the ability to move markets and they understand people because they make product for people rather than they're just like speculating in spreadsheets and stuff. Not to say they're not doing technical due diligence, but I think maybe their instinct is on a different level too, because they make product that gets consumed at that scale.
Right. Like that's why they're so good at consumer facing, right? Like they're like, I mean, this is what, sorry, Bill, I didn't mean to cut you off. The point was basically like the idea of like, oh, they're celebrities, like they didn't have to do anything. That just kills me, man. I'm just like, dude, do you understand how hard these guys work to like get to the level they're at, right? Like,
and to maintain it. Like if you think of like Kim Kardashian, someone who personally I was never really a fan of, but looking at what she's done over time.
It's hustle, man. That's
because it's easy just to say like, oh, she had a sex tape and then, like she became famous or whatever for nothing, which you could argue is kind of the initial point. But to then keep going for however long it's been. I don't think
people understand how hard a lot of these celebrities, like this is the thing. Yes. I'm not going to include Kim Kardashian because she did come from a lot of money. She's an extreme, right?
Yeah, that's true. An extreme example.
Her father was Robert Kardashian, represented OJ. Is a rich LA family. Having said that, I'm a Nas and Snoop. These guys came from nothing, right? They came from literally nothing. And to have these people say like, oh, just because they're celebrities, like, dude, how did they become celebrities? Do you know how hard they work to become celebrities? I don't think the people criticizing have put in the amount of work that these guys do to get there, man.
And another thing is, you could argue that the amount of like consumer value and capital that's traded around their careers is probably more than what they've captured back.
Oh, absolutely.
By a factor of, by some crazy exponent.
Yeah. Well, so let me cap it with this. So I did see some positive stuff, thank God. It was from, I got a lot of quote retweets from some Black Twitter accounts, and they're like, this is Black excellence. And I'm like, yes, this is like, you should be, this is a positive for the community. And the fact that, and the point they brought up, or a couple of tweets I saw, was basically like, they held these things, right? It's like, they cut these checks and held them for 7 to 8 years. Like, it wasn't a conspicuous consumption. They weren't buying jets. I mean, I'm sure these guys have a lot of the conspicuous consumption, but having said that, it's like, this is what you want to be teaching young people that haven't had the means or that don't have this type of role model. It's like, you invest your money, you might not get a Robinhood deal flow, but you invest your money and you just let that shit compound, right? So, man,
the way I see it, man, is like everything. There's skill, there's hard work, and there's luck. We could spend a whole hour talking about each of those, so we don't need to go down the rabbit hole. But yeah, did Nas have luck meeting some people? Yeah, I'm sure. But did he literally come from nothing? Did he have like a God-given or a natural talent for poetry that became rap? Yes.
Yeah.
Was he born at a certain time where hip-hop was like going off on a rocket ship? Yes. But he also worked incredibly hard, and he did a lot of those things. And now to keep it going for this amount of time, even if that just means finding a good partner, because that's another thing, right? A lot of these guys are working with other people who are really, in the weeds with this stuff, and they have the deal flow already. But like, he had to get in a position to provide enough value that was mutually beneficial. So man, you just got to celebrate it. And I think the people that are spouting off about it, they're going to be finding a reason to complain anyway, man. So you can't really entertain it.
We were going to do a whole segment about reading Twitter comments, right? We should probably hold that, because that shit will...
Not today. You're not in the... I think you're going to go off too much.
Yeah, dude.
Let it calm down. You'll forget about it tomorrow.
Quick round robin on it. Best Nas album. Trung, you got one?
Oh, it's got to be Illmatic.
It's got to be Illmatic.
It is legendary, man. It's
Jack, legendary. I don't know if you got one.
I think Illmatic, but I'm going to look it up while you answer, just to make sure that I'm...
Yeah, I'd probably say Illmatic too. It's the obvious one, but I will say, they're all great in their own ways.
That time, the mid-90s, dude, oh my God, man. Wu-Tang's first album, 36 Chambers, Ready to Die, Biggie, the 2 double albums from Pac and Biggie, Life After Death, and All Eyes on Me.
Can't beat it, man. Reasonable Doubt. I can't remember when Reasonable Doubt came out, but anyway, so so all right, cool. Well, yeah. Anyway, big up to Nas and the crew. They've been killing it. Robinhood's stock went public today that we're recording on Thursday. This will be out a few days or a week after. So we'll see how it goes after that.
It's actually only down 3% now. Yeah, it opened at $38. I
wonder if they're gonna stop people from being able to sell. Anyway, let's move on from Robinhood. All right, do you want to talk about this Google ad stuff, Trung? This is something we were discussing a little bit in the Telegram
group. You want
to
actually throw up the tweet? If you want to throw it up, it's actually super interesting.
Which one was it? I don't know if I've got it. The Javen guy or the J something?
No, Tanae.
Oh. Let me pull that up. I don't think I have it in the... Do you have it open?
Okay, I'll read it. It's from Tanae. I can't even say his last name. I don't want to be offended. Jaipuria. He's I think he works I think he worked at Andreessen. He's a really smart writer, investor. But he had a great tweet, man. So all the big tech companies did their earnings, and you know how that there's a really famous chart from Mary Meeker. We could probably pull this up, man. I fucking need a screen share right now. I've been swearing so much, man.
I think I've made the screen share. It's on for multiple.
Mary Meeker
try
digital advertising. Okay, so let me just talk through for our listeners, and hopefully we can see it. But basically, Mary Meeker is a venture capitalist. She's very well known in the late 90s. I can't remember if she worked at Morgan Stanley, but she's an analyst, was calling a lot of the tech stuff. But her report, the internet report, comes out every year. Everybody looks at it. the chart that she's had for many years now is basically like, if you look at where the money is allocated in advertising versus where the eyeballs are, it's like, whatever, I'll do the hypothetical example, but like the media spend on television or the media eyeballs, it's like, whatever, 60%, but it gets 80% of advertising, right? There's a divergence. Basically, a lot more advertising dollars are still in kind of older media. And she's like, there's an inevitable shift that's going to happen to digital. And obviously with COVID, everything went super digital. And then we just had the most recent earnings from big tech and the biggest digital advertisers. And the numbers are absolutely insane, right? So Google ad revenue, basically ad base, up 69% year on year. Yeah, there it is. Insane. YouTube up 84% year on year. And look at the numbers that these are coming off of. These are at low bases, right? Like Google's already doing 120, 130, 140 billion dollars a year in revenue, and it's going up 70% year on year. Snapchat, 116%, Twitter, 87%, LinkedIn, for God's sake, LinkedIn is up 100% year on year digital advertising.
It's crazy.
So just the whole idea that as the shift finally happens, where all this money that is still stuck in older media, whether that be television, even radio is doing about 10 billion in advertising this year versus podcasts, which is doing about $1 billion. So radio is 10 times bigger in ad dollars. Although I think they probably have more man hours or human hours. I think it's very underestimated, especially in middle America, how much radio is consumed. I remember when I started working, I was doing construction.
Because it's the cars too, right? Like people are driving, and us guys on the coast a lot. Well, maybe not LA, California, but in New York, I don't think about it because I walk everywhere.
Right.
But most of the world is still driving around. Yeah, of course.
But having said that, so to put a pin on the hat, absolutely massive growth numbers in digital advertising, even from huge bases already. And yeah, I think it's just going to keep running, right? So love to, the opportunity here is to pick Bilal's brain, former Google employee. So, I mean, Bilal, what you can pick, man, like tell us about the magic of these platforms, why, and you work in the digital ad space and what you're seeing and if the shift in your eyes is inevitable.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, so when I started working on it, it was January 2010, right? So just to paint a picture of what it was like then, it wasn't the beginning of Google, obviously, but even then I would be going into rooms and people, like there's a CMO of a public company said to me, we don't believe in the internet, we call it the internet. And that's always stayed with me. And this guy had a budget of, billions and billions in marketing spend. And my job was
2010.
No, that was later. That was when I moved to New York, actually. That was in 2013, 14. And yeah, insane. And this guy, he was 70 something years old. To be fair, their stock actually did pretty well. They were a huge TV spender.
You can't say what it is. Can you tell us and bleep it out?
It's a shoe company that isn't like Nike, Adidas. That I'd work with some of them as well.
Okay. You've said enough. We can tease it.
Yeah. They're old school, and I mean, honestly, it's not. I mean, I would say the name is just like I don't know, like any implications.
Cool,
but
I don't want to get
some funny stories with this guy. I mean, he had some legendary emails and stuff that he would say, but I mean, stuff that probably should be cancelable nowadays for this sort of stuff he would say. But I mean, one thing I'll quickly say: we took him to the US Open, and it was one of them client events. I know Jack's done a bunch of this in his old job as well, and he literally told us these are the worst seats I've ever been in. And I'm sure we were just sitting there like, what? This is so ridiculous. It was just like a normal seat. It wasn't in like a box or anything, but we were like, all right, well, if you spend a little bit more money on YouTube, maybe we'll upgrade you next time. But yeah, so obviously I'm kind of joking, but he said stuff like that. And it was so that's in 2015 or 2014, 2010. The way people saw Google, I'd argue even today, is people just think of Google search. Right, but Google is just obviously the full stack of advertising on the advertising side. There's awareness, there's the YouTube side, which is basically like the equivalent of TV advertising. There's what used to be print advertising that people spend a bunch of money on is Google Content Network, Display Network, and millions of websites on the internet, AdSense. And then right at the bottom is Google search, right? Like when I say the bottom, I mean the funnel. So like what people have spent traditionally their money on is brand advertising. Like the majority of budgets were spent on eyeballs, Coca-Cola, get it in your face, car ads like Jack used to work on. And that makes sense because you're trying to go broad. But what the amazing thing with Google search, and arguably why it's the best, advertising product of all time, it was the first time you got true intent and someone just putting their hand up at the moment of purchase or at the moment of wanting information, right? Because you spend hundreds of hours doing other stuff, but when you're looking for a flight, you type in cheap flights to Barcelona, or you'll say best Airbnbs in Spain or whatever. And that's the moment where a booking.com is going to say, I want to make sure I bid on every single query, and not giving much away here, but they were basically the biggest client at the time.
Well, the OTAs are responsible for the majority of
that one
right?
company, I think, spent over $1 billion just on Google search.
Online travel agencies, OTAs, are the largest spenders on Google.
Yeah. And they're just bidding on every single thing, right? So that's one, is the intent. The second big thing is auction, right? So a lot of people listening might already know this, but for those of you who don't, let's go back to what advertising was all about before. Magazines, TV, print. You would say, I've got X eyeballs. This is the rate to reach 1,000, 1 million people. Now pay me this money, right? There was no real measurement, like how many people clicked and went to the site and how many purchased, what's the lifetime value, all the crazy stuff we can do now. With search, they said, well, we're not just going to fix the price. We're going to open it up to the market. There's going to be an auction. And without going into all the weeds, it's a dynamic auction where I can say, as a Shopify small site who's selling shoes, I know my margins, I know my average order value. I'm willing to spend $3 per click. And someone else comes along like Amazon and says, well, actually, we can bid $3.50 because, we're Amazon and we want to be in the top. But the key thing is that's just the one part of the auction. The second part of the auction is what's called ad rank, or basically quality score, right, is a better way to describe it. So that means if I'm in the top position, I could actually be paying a lot less than someone in number 2 or number 5 position. And the reason is because if my ad is the most relevant, if I'm Nike and someone types in Nike, my ad should show up first. So I'm rewarded. So Nike's cost per click could be 50 cents for their own click, and Adidas could be in second place paying $5. So it's not just the one who's got the biggest bid wins. It's those two components. So really this revolutionized.
They're really rewarding
relevancy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's also a lot of negatives, right? Listen, let me frame it with the negatives. I want you to keep talking about.
Definitely, no.
The thing that because it does come to mind where you say the relevancy. So a big criticism now is basically though that like your competitors can buy your keywords, right? So that's supposed to stop that. But if you actually type in Shopify, you might get a competitor at the top. So Toby Lutke, the CEO of Shopify, has complained.
He's been calling them out, right?
Yeah, he's like, I have to pay to stay on top of Google search, right? Which is it does. He basically said it was hush money or like a mob payment essentially, right?
I completely get that point of view. If I was paying out of my own pocket to bid on my own brand, I would feel like that. But the other argument is it's a free open market, and there are some policies if you look at traditional advertising, Microsoft and Apple forever were calling each other out, right? Like they were talking about each other's stuff. We've always done that. So you could argue this is something similar, and they've tried to account for, the relevancy to get the user the best result. But anyway, I'm not like a spokesperson for Google. This is my opinion. And I do think it's in Google's advantage to have all of those running, obviously because of money. I've worked with a lot of brands who didn't want to bid on their own brand, and they just lost money because why are you even going to risk having your competitor at that moment in that person's mind? Like, don't even risk it. So
it's just how it is, right? Like that's the game, right? Like before, if you're going to a supermarket, you have to bid for that shelf space, right?
That's a great
if you want to be, example. You want to be eye level, you got to pay for it. So I get that. So just to summarize, the number one is the moment of intent, which is just unbelievable, right? It's the most powerful and best time to capture somebody. The auction mechanisms. What else is there? What is all the secret sauce that people might not know?
Yeah, and then I guess for me, beyond search, because obviously as a business, search is incredible because they're not sharing revenue with anyone pretty much. There are something called search partners like Ask Jeeves, if you remember them, and Ask. So they run basically Google search ads on their search engines and they take a cut, right? So that apart from that, they're basically got 100% margins on that transaction. Obviously, there's other like costs to account for, but you can't compare that with anything, right? Even YouTube and which we can come on to in a second, which is an amazing business. You have revenue shares, right? So YouTube pays out 55% to the publisher, keeps 45% for themselves as the platform. Google has 100% of the share on Google search. And then a big thing, what's happening right now is with Apple, who are kind of playing around now with iOS updates where they're trying to bring more privacy controls and stuff like that. But they're basically blocking a lot of these pixels and stuff like that, which is a huge problem for advertising right now, right? So if you're running Facebook ads, your numbers have gone down pretty much a lot of the time. And so Facebook's getting impacted by that. Everyone's getting impacted, but I would argue that Google search isn't as impacted because it's first party data. Whereas, you know, with Facebook, you're relying on people's browsing behavior and stuff like that across websites. So anyway, we can go down a rabbit hole there. But the last thing I'll say is YouTube. And this is something that people have been talking a lot about because the numbers just came out. I think the quarterly revenue was 7 billion or something like that, which is kind of crazy to put that in perspective.
It's going to surpass Netflix.
It's going to surpass Netflix, right?
Yeah.
And that is insane because if you look at just from a business point of view, Netflix spends billions of dollars on production and creating all this amazing content. And it's got a different business model. They're charging people every month. And then YouTube is like, you know, obviously investing. They're actually paying out $20-30 billion to creators and publishers too. But they're not like commissioning House of Cards, right? Like it's a very different business model. And now they're adding in subscription too. So they're getting advertising money and subscription. Yeah. And they've got 1-2 billion users or whatever. I don't know the exact numbers.
2 billion plus.
2 billion plus. So if you just think of that, that's on the user side. And the last part I'll say is the ads, the last innovation, bringing the intent that we talked about on search and the auction dynamic to video advertising. That didn't really exist in the same way. So they invented this thing called TrueView ads. So you know those annoying ads everyone skips on YouTube? A lot of people don't know, but if you press skip and you watch less than 30 seconds, the advertiser doesn't pay any money. And that was YouTube's way of saying, well, how do we bring that same intent to this sort of advertising, which traditionally only paid for impressions? And yeah, you can still buy impressions as well, like, you know, number of eyeballs. But a lot of people use the auction, and you know that costs, man. Like I run these ads, they cost like 2 to 3, 5 cents sometimes, and you're only paying when someone wants to watch it. So that was a pretty big innovation as well.
Well, dude, I want to talk about that actually because the intent piece is so big, right? Is if YouTube can actually deliver. So let me ask you, you're the expert here. How close is that to being similar to the text search? How far are we from that happening?
I think it's still far because the text search is literally the moment you're proactively searching, you're putting your hand up and saying, give me this information. Whereas YouTube is still, you're generally being pushed that message.
It might be like, hey, what is a recipe for chicken Caesar salad, right? And it's like, you might be able to send up.
That's a different type of search, right? Like, because there's navigational search. There's like, how do I get to a place? There's a commercial driven search, which is like, what's the price of this? What's the best credit card? Stuff like that. But that's just search. Obviously, most of YouTube is actually just people browsing. And the way you target people is not just on search. It's like just based on the audience browsing behavior. So, and actually, if you're listening to this and you're curious, if you go on your browser and go to google.com/ads, ADS/preferences, it's not 100% accurate, but you can see what Google is seeing as your profile in terms of the advertising groups.
Fascinating.
So I'm looking at mine right now and it's got my age, it's got types of music I like.
Nas, does it say Nas? Because if it doesn't, it's wrong.
It's got hip hop. And this is really broad, right? So all of this isn't completely accurate. But as an advertiser, then you can go and say, I want to go find millions of people who are hip hop fans who are in this demographic. So it's pretty incredible, man. And the last thing I'll mention is now there's ways that you can take the Google search intent actually on Google search, like typing in best hotels in Barcelona, create a group and then target those people on YouTube with ads, which you couldn't do when I used to work there.
They're connecting.
There's a way to do it. It's quite advanced. Most people don't do this still. And that way you're actually taking the intent of that person who's already shown the intent, and then you're getting the scale of video, and you're telling a better story than a text ad. You're getting a video with sound, sight, motion, or whatever. So man, look, I'm not like, I do work in this stuff and I find it interesting. It can be a little boring for some people, but if you just compare that to dumb TV ads, and TV has its place, and they're not, you can make money from running TV ads for sure, but there's none of this, right? Like you can't segment and target in this way and actually see all the analytics and see how it's working. So I just think more money on a macro level is going to keep moving in this direction. And YouTube's probably in the best place, because if the money is still in the brand dollars and the kind of like conversion dollars, which is like people spending to buy, or like commercial at the bottom of the funnel, they've got all of it. So yeah, man, we could talk about it for ages, but go on.
I want to add, well, first of all, man, that's amazing. We need to keep grilling you about this, because I know you're getting in the weeds, but I think people will like it. Yeah. I have 3 comments about YouTube, and then I want to ask Jack about it because he's worked in television, and I don't know, he's done ads in the past too. So YouTube, what's interesting is just from, if you're looking at it from an investor point of view, its average revenue per user is only a third of Facebook, right? So like huge room to run. Like if let's say even doubles, right? It's a $60 billion a year business. And and a 10x multiple, and that's not insane. So literally YouTube is probably a $500 billion asset, right? Which is insane. That'd be like the 15th to 20th biggest company in the world. So that's one thing.
That would be twice the size of Netflix, right? Because Netflix like exactly. 230.
It's bigger than Disney. The other thing that I want to mention was, and you touched on it, but so YouTube really is positioning themselves to take over the cable bundle, right? Like people keep talking about, who, is NBC going to go over the top? Is CBS going to go over the top? But it's actually, wait a second, YouTube already has a TV package. YouTube TV costs $70 a month. They're already building these relationships out, and the amount of money that's in cable television is astronomical, right? We're talking tens and tens and tens. I think it might even be close to $100 billion a year. Yeah. Is that kind of industry. If that's shifting online, people are kind of missing. They think that people are going to put that money into like streaming services. Hey, $10 on Netflix a month, $10 on Disney a month. It's like, well, actually, YouTube is building the full replacement. And if they capture that, and like you said, this is adding on top of the fact that they already have this existing ad business, which is 90% of their revenue.
And that's the thing now, people can just press a button and go in the same interface. You buy YouTube ads in the same interface you buy Google search ads.
There you go,
so
dude.
it's all in one place, right?
The levers they have to pull to make YouTube bigger are absolutely, it's crazy. This literally, and it's already the second most visited website in the world, is the second biggest search engine in the world already, behind Google. But yeah, I'm blown away by it. I'd love to tease out more. I'm going to do a little bit more research.
Yeah, we can do that. I'm curious on Jack's point of view though, because Jack, you worked, in advertising forever. You did like real creative stuff, like the other side that I haven't had as much experience in. Like, did you see this changing over time as well? Because you're quite digitally savvy, but you're probably working with a lot of traditional people. Like, how was their kind of mindset towards the stuff you can do in digital versus like what it used to be like?
Yeah, I was just thinking about it as you guys were talking. One of the biggest barriers, I think, is similar to what we were talking about with smart contracts. Like that's 10 years ahead of what we're talking about here, but the talent that exists to place digital media is way smaller of a pool, and the interfaces that you have to do to like run an ad on Facebook. Bilal, we were talking about this. It's like trying to like land the Starship Enterprise. Like you open that thing, it's like,
what the hell's going on?
Am I looking at here? Right?
I think Google's even worse, to be honest. It's
right.
Even
exactly. You can boost a post, or you can do like these really basic things, but the really sophisticated ad strategies, like you need like incredibly talented people to deploy that. One, probably because like engineers are building those interfaces, and it's like like they're making so much money without it being this like really sophisticated consumer product that maybe like they must be working on the UI of it and trying to make it easier to place ads and stuff. But that maybe like when none of this stuff happens overnight, but I feel like that has been a bit of a barrier to date. Whereas like we want to run a Super Bowl ad. It's like you got a contact at wherever. It's like, give me the thing in this format and we'll run it, right? Or we want to place.
It's also, they give the full service, right? Like it's very different, where like half of our job was to train people how to do it themselves because we couldn't do it all for them. But I think
it's completely obvious to most people at this point that like dollars spent online are like, you probably get more bang for your buck. But you also see like there are anomalies where like I sort of equate it to the D2C brands that end up in Target or whatever, right? It's just like you're selling, I think it was Harry's razors or something, and you think like, oh, these guys would never go in retail because it would kill their margins and stuff. But it's like ad placement, and there are so many people that like we're so close to it that we don't quite understand that there still is like an enormous amount of reach that you can get from being in like more traditional media channels, especially
for CPG. And like, because 70-80% of purchases still happen in store. Maybe for that category even higher, because it's, oh, I need a razor right now. I'm doing my groceries. Before. Exactly.
Yeah. I was definitely like dogmatic, like we shouldn't be doing anything outside of digital. And like, I didn't really have any data to back that up back then. But I think honestly, having like built a digital business and still not like being reasonably digitally savvy and still being like incredibly intimidated by a lot of those interfaces and things like that. Obviously, big businesses have the resources to learn it and staff it up. Another interesting thing that I noticed is like the best talent in that world is not going to accept a salary. So like if you know how to turn $1 into $2, why are you going to like go and work a $80,000 job at a corporation? And Bilal, we've talked a lot about this. There are obviously exceptions to the rule, but it's almost like traders at this point. Like they really get the market to the point where like the best talent is working in the most liquid part of the market.
Oh, they're like stock traders, right? Like you're saying like the top digital ad people, they should be compensated like a Morgan Stanley, a top Morgan Stanley commodities trader.
100%, like and they will be eventually. Yeah, I think if not already, in some cases, like you know, agencies work on performance, and if you get enough of the right clients, and you have like you know a stake in the business, or performance based pay, or you share upside in some other way, you see that happen at the low end of the market. But I think maybe that's a behavior that will start to sort of trickle up into these bigger businesses. I find it all pretty fascinating. But I also hate, like, we all don't think ads work on us, right? I've worked in advertising for a long time.
Yeah, like, that's the funny thing, right? Everyone says, I hate ads.
Yeah.
But we're still seeing them. The fact we even talked about Harry's is because we saw ads, or we heard ads on a podcast. And that's why I think a lot of people, like on Google search specifically, there were just people who didn't really know what they're talking about. And they would say, well, who clicks those ads anyway? And I'll be like, well, $100 billion worth of clicks. Right. So if that's who's clicking on them. And the one thing I'll say, just to add to what you said about the talent and stuff, I'm not trying to speak about myself like I'm one of those people, but I have for the last few years been self-employed, and I do that sort of work, right?
Whoa. Hold on. Not investment advice. Come on, guys.
No, all I was going to say is that is basically how I make most of my living.
Yeah.
And I had to do a combination of, I'll charge a retainer for someone, which traditionally, like the first big kind of contract I got, they were looking for a full-time employee, and I just pitched them. I actually responded to, you know, when you get automated emails where they say like, oh, you signed up for the product, email us if you want to speak. And I always respond to them to see who responds back to me. And that connection turned into, to be transparent, like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of a contract, right, over a long time. And that company wanted to hire a full-time person. And I said, look, I'm not looking for a job, but I can do this work for you. I can do the same output, but you're getting someone with more experience. I'm going to charge you a similar price, but then I can go and have multiple clients. And then to add on to that, I'd created deals directly with people where they couldn't afford that amount, but I would say, I'll do a revenue share with you. And now I get a percentage of revenue for every month someone signs up.
Talk about Bilal's business, man.
No, it's not. Bro. No, it's not that complicated. Those are basically the two main ways, and then I make a tiny bit of money from advertising on my other podcast. So that's pretty much it. But it's just, I don't know, man. I think a lot of people don't even know that's an option, and there's more risk, right? Like tomorrow, those people could say, "Hey, we can't afford to pay you anymore," and I expect that to happen at some point where things just churn. But that's okay. That's the part of the risk of me being self-employed. So I kind of accept that.
Well, that's what they always say, right? They say in a recession, marketing goes first. I don't know if that's true, though. Is it?
Well, I think at a high level, yes, but a lot of money. And that's actually a critique of the numbers, the year-over-year numbers, because this time last year, people stopped advertising or they cut their ads. So that's one contributing factor. But normally, like when I started the Google stuff, it was 2010, in the recession still, basically, right? Like after 2008 and 9, people were still cutting their budgets, but Google and Facebook gained in that time because we had the only sort of advertising that could be measured. So we could say, you're going to give us $1, we're going to turn it into $3. And the hard thing is now it's becoming harder to do that because it's an auction and a marketplace, $1 now costs $2 or whatever. So
inflation, isn't it, Bilal?
Inflation, yeah. It's the Fed's fault, mate. It's the Fed's fault.
Well, it's also, I think you're right. They're going to cut advertising, but the Facebook and Google are going to be last, right? That billboard's going first.
Yeah,
probably. Yeah. But now it's getting to the point where billboards, radio, and TV might be really efficient.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and it's just I'm kind of agnostic. If I was a CMO of a company, I would say, just show me the numbers and show me the reach and the pros and cons. And like, it might make sense to run radio ads right now. So anyway, we talked about a bunch. Go on, Jack.
I was just saying one more thing of like, all these markets have like arbitrage inherently baked into them, right? So I've got a couple of friends that started e-com brands in 2012 or whatever. And it's literally, you could throw a dart at a wall on Facebook in 2012 and make money because like you're the first in here and like there isn't this crazy market where people are bidding against you. And the other condition that creates is people just like reverse engineer what works from everybody else, which is harder to do in TV or on billboards or whatever else, because it's not this mark where everybody sees what you're doing. So that to me is like, it just squeezes it and it becomes so efficient and so competitive that like you really do, we end up in the same place of like, the person who's top 1% gets 95% of the traffic and everyone else just gets destroyed. So it's just like, it's a really complex subject, but because when you were talking about attribution, Bilal, I was like, you can put an equation in front of someone, but it only works for 2 weeks. And then like that technique dries up or somebody else beats you to the keyword. They launch an article that's ahead of yours. It's back to the drawing board. So I think the other thing that's nice about sticking to TV and stuff like that is like, we'll just create a fun story, like a great TV ad, and people are going to love it. And we don't have to like just basically show up on the battlefield every day and just get beaten down by someone else's like better war strategy, essentially.
You're not overcomplicating it with TV, which is what happens a lot. Sometimes you have too many numbers to look at. And most of the biggest problem with the reason I even have any sort of business in that world is because you show a screen full of numbers in Google Analytics to 10 different people, and they're going to come up with different conclusions.
Yeah.
And my job is really to say, what's the most important thing, knowing how everything links together. So I think that's another thing. Like with advertisers we worked with in the past, they would say, well, don't we just want to spend on that campaign because it just makes all the money? And like you said, that's too simplistic because that's not really, you're not really capturing how users actually behave. Like you don't just buy a visualized value course from seeing it for the first time and then clicking and spending a few $100s. Right. You've seen Jack tweet hundreds of times. You might have had a tweet back from him. You might have watched a video on NIA. And then eventually that person might buy something, but you, as the person who owns that business, you don't even have insight into all those touch points. So it's, super complicated, but macro thing is this money is moving into this area for sure, man. They're in a good place.
Yeah, maybe to wrap it up is we talk about it all the time, is trusted distribution, and that's why brands are building their own media channels and like going direct to the audience, building a relationship with them directly, is because all of these other things are just going to get squeezed so hard that at the very best you have to employ just killer talent to stay on top of it. And that's also true if you're building your own thing, but the relationship is deeper than just like trying to win somebody over in that moment that you talked about, Bilal.
Yeah.
Completely.
Tron, you're going to say something?
Here's the last feather until we get edge of internet stuff, because I know people will be annoyed if they don't have edge of internet from Jack. But Bilal, just hit us straight, man. I know you're unloading some Google along the way, and you're telling us you don't have as much Google as you do back in the day. Tell us how upset you are that you didn't hold on to your winners, and tell us what you've done.
I was actually, so this is referencing the Telegram, in our Telegram group chat, which you can join by clicking the link in the show notes below. Trang and I and Jack as well, were talking about me selling Google stock along the way of me being there. I tried looking, because you asking me like, what's the average sell price? And there's no way to easily see. It's like a stupid interface. But I was looking at when I sold, and that was a little depressing. But, I think what I was doing, so I sold in 2011, 12, 14, and that was pre-stock split. So I haven't even figured out how much of
what
unrealized.
Is it now? It's 2,700 today?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So they were I think I definitely sold some like 400 and maybe like below 1,000, or probably at some point the equivalent of today's money, because it was a stock split. Honestly, I really can't remember. But what I did do, to be fair, the reason I was selling was I believed in the company long term, so I still have held stuff until today. But I just had a huge chunk in one stock, right? And I was seeing what's going on with Facebook, what's happening with Amazon. So most of that stuff I rebought. I bought Amazon. At one point, I had more Facebook stock than I did Google stock. And in fact, even now, I think I have more Facebook than Google stock. Oh, interesting. Yeah, because I haven't actually got much Google stock, to be honest. Yeah, so and or I'd buy like the QQQ, like the Nasdaq or S&P 500, because I thought I can't put all my eggs in one basket. Like, I'm being paid by this company and I have stock. So if I lose my job or something bad happens, I need to spread the risk. But yeah, it's kind of depressing because I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just like selling along the way.
Google has the greatest business model ever. They're going to be fine, bro.
I know. But Amazon's done pretty well. No,
you're
I will
the Internet guy.
That's true. I was betting against it, man. But no, I will say, if I had to pick one, which was Jack's question in our Telegram, I'm not really buying Google stock right now, but like the more I'm reading this, the way we're talking about it, like YouTube alone is worth it,
man.
Right? And then I look at Amazon and I say, yeah, but look at their cloud. Like their cloud is already crazy. So I'm just like, oh, just buy all of them. Like, they're all not investment advice. But
well, this is not investment advice, but in my mind, if you have like whatever 100K sitting in a freaking savings account, which some people do, right? It's just as safe putting it into these stocks, man. Yeah. It's like they're in 5 to 10 years, they're not going to be smaller. It's just like, even if they get broken up, they'll be more valuable.
Someone is commenting 5 years from now in this YouTube chat and said, Trung, you lost me all my money, man. Google got sued.
Not investment advice.
100%.
I do have some money that's sitting in a checking account that I should probably take out. But what the last thing I want to say was, I totally agree with you, dude, is so I worked at a startup called Kensho. We were acquired by S&P Global, and I got S&P stock, and it's the exact same thing. It's like quadrupled since the deal, and I sold everything. But to your logic, I'm like, but my logic is a little bit different. Actually, it was acquisition logic. So your logic was diversification. Makes total sense. My logic was more so, if you get acquired by a company, should you keep their stock? And the question you always should ask yourself is, if that was a cash equivalent, would you buy this company? If the answer is no, you should sell.
That's a great way to think about it. Yeah.
The problem is that you shouldn't buy it, because it's also S&P is something we should talk about, because they have 3 monopolies essentially on data index business.
So what's the name of the company? Is that the name?
S&P Global. Like like S&P 500, that's their index business. And like, if you hear about bond ratings, it's like a AAA bond That's S&P doing the ratings. Those are full monopoly businesses, and they're cruising because their entire business is based on the amount of debt that's issued and the amount of assets under management that use their indices. And S&P 500, a lot of people are using that indice, right? And all the other ones that they're using. But TLDR, I'll talk about their business model another time, but they're cruising toward a $500 billion valuation. Like, just, they don't have to do anything. Just full cruise control. All they're waiting on is more financial assets going around. But yeah.
All right. So let's talk about edge of the internet. Jack, you did this really cool workday auction. I don't know if you want to share your screen, or I can share it if you want.
Yeah, let me share it.
This was a really cool idea, man.
Thank you. Let me just share this up. Can you see this?
Yeah.
That coming up?
This is killer. Yeah.
So we just ran. Well, a lot of this is inspired by conversations we've been having and just thinking about the future of work and, NFTs, Web3, all of this stuff. So the experiments or the participation in this world today has been like, make a piece of art, sell a piece of art, right? Which is 99% of the use of NFTs as they stand right now. A lot of people working on a lot of cool stuff in this space beyond like the trading of a token that represents an asset. But what I think is interesting is this is partially about NFTs, but partially about the market dynamics that NFTs have been introduced under, right? The auctions and the marketplaces that concentrate attention around these assets. Like, anybody can make an NFT, go on OpenSea and do whatever, but the thing that makes it really interesting in my mind is the fact that you're like kind of creating this little market for something that has this really high frequency behavior. And there are a couple of interesting dynamics in the foundation platform specifically, which is what I'm sharing my screen on now. We talked about this in one of our early podcasts, but if people bid in the last 15 minutes of the auction, then the timer resets itself. So the idea here was like price discovery for time. So a lot of the stuff that I've put out over the last couple of years has been the opposite of this message, like don't sell your time. So this is kind of, there is a certain irony to this exercise as well. But what I wanted to experiment with is like, what does the market value my time at, knowing what it knows about me? So I'm trying to basically put a value on proof of work as it pertains to like a single creator. So if you had like, think of anybody who's like produces stuff on the internet that you like, if they gave you an opportunity for them to produce something for you and just let you bid on an auction for their time, how much would you be prepared to pay? And that's basically what I was trying to figure out here. So I started 4 auctions, split my day into 4 segments, so 3-hour working sessions, and set the reserve at the lowest you could set it, which is $200. So that's, around $60 something an hour. And let's see if somebody bids at that rate. And then the auction runs for 24 hours. So they ended up all closing at a really similar price, which is also fascinating, right? It's like there's 4 different people won these auctions. They all closed between 1 Ethereum and 1.2 Ethereum, which is somewhere between like $2,300 and $2,800 based on the price of Ethereum today. And then, we'll do 3 hours of work, we'll make something else. And in some cases, potentially, build an asset off the back of that meeting, and then potentially they own that and they can auction that. So kind of an experiment, learning or trying to test a hypothesis really that the future of work is going to be like this really liquid market for talent, right? Like the ideas that we've been talking around ad buying, where it's like you need Bilal to run a consult on your brand. What results does he have in his portfolio, and how well has he displayed that, and what are you willing to pay for that? So this is basically leading me down another road, which is, can you build something that allows, I think just creators are pretty horrible at monetizing themselves in general, right? We've talked about this a lot. There's been a lot of themes, and the advice, that I've given myself even is like, you need to build a product. But the reality is for a lot of people, there's a stage in between that where you're not necessarily like operating at a scale where a product can satisfy your financial requirements, right?
You're not completely divorcing time.
Exactly.
And could I just add one thing, Jack? Just the way I described it before was like I see like a job, you're straight up selling your time, and then there's something on the other side where you're just selling like output or a end result product that runs itself, and in between there's something where you're still being paid for the output, but it's not dependent on your time as an input, if that makes sense. And I think that's kind of in this case you are selling the 3 hours, but I think it's a hybrid. It's not the same as like hire me to be part of your company. It's kind of in between.
Yeah, and I think at all scales, like the anti-fragile approach to being a creator, I think is a smart one. So you're gonna have like different revenue streams as an individual, like even like in different ways you package up your craft. I think like smart contract engineers, let's use that as an example. Everybody's trying to launch these Ethereum projects, right? And these guys don't know how much to charge. There's no supply and demand dynamic in the same way that like a market for a very sophisticated asset is like, if you're buying and selling Google stock, there's price discovery, there's buyer, seller, there's what it reflects the value of the thing, but we don't have that really for people that have skills that are in high demand. And I'm sure there are a ton of people building platforms to do this. But I think what's interesting about something like this is how does that start to integrate with the networks that you've already built rather than trying to put people into different platforms? So Twitter, for example, loads of people have said Twitter is your resume, right? So somebody who's reading your Twitter feed kind of has a sense of what you're capable of, what you're about, what type of work you do. If Trung was like, hey, I'll ghostwrite 20 threads a week for a news publication, I'm putting an auction up now, right? Bid on it.
Yeah.
There's going to be a market there, and you wouldn't.
That's a great idea.
And you wouldn't have to.
Hold on a second. That is freaking genius. I do have the boogie, but hold on, Jack. We need to add that for next week because I want to tease that out.
Yeah.
But what I want to add here was, I just want to confirm, you made about 10 G's from this little non-fungible performance art, as you called it.
Correct.
So my last question is this: before I boogie, but you guys continue. How much money have you made from mere NFTs to date? About
$470,000, I think.
Killing the game, son.
Well, I tweeted something earlier. Let me pull the screen share up just before you go, Trung, if you got a second. But this is a really surprising stat.
Gonna get him in trouble, but go on, Jack.
No, the guy that runs Foundation messaged me yesterday. He's like, "Did you know you're in the top 10 of creators here?"
That is sick,
bro. You are. That is incredible. You're Edward Snowden's number one.
Yeah, same list as Edward Snowden. You don't want to be in that same list, do you? But this is a different type of list.
The last thing I want to add with the listeners is I'm so glad we did this because I'm clipping this out and that's going on Twitter as the promo for this episode. How much money did Jack Butcher make on Mirror?
Well, this idea, also is I've brute forced my way here as well. Look at these guys. I got one of one.
Edward Snowden, he has some built-in reputation there.
Yeah, and he sold one NFT and made $5 million, right? I've sold 27 to 23 different people.
Yeah,
it's a very different game that we're playing, and I think a lot of creators are like, "Oh, I need to, produce the perfect thing," and that's gonna rocket me. So I've just been playing this game of brute forcing consistency for years and years and years.
It's incredible.
I'm going to boogie. This is amazing, but you guys keep going, man. We'll catch up. Thank you and apologies.
Thanks, Trung, man.
Yeah.
Let's
go back to the bit we're talking about, the market for someone like Trung.
Wait, sorry, Trung, you should log off because I don't know if I can kick him off. Yeah, log off if you can. All right, cool. Still on it. All right, but go on. Yeah, why you're talking?
So that idea of even people who have an incredible amount of demand on their time and their skill set, I really don't know how to price themselves. It's a really weird thing. Like I've felt really uncomfortable saying, hey, my time costs this much, and I've had to like justify it somehow of like, here's a Calendly link where you can pay X to talk to me. And now I have this thing where I can point to be like, oh, I ran an open auction for my time. This is what it's valued at.
It's straight up market. It's like what we talked about before with Google. It's like straight up auction. There's like market everyone. Forces. Yeah. And I know I'm as big a fan of this as anyone as well, but I think you're even more than me, which is like, let the market decide. And you don't have any, like you'll put stuff out and most of the time it hits. And then there's a few things that don't. And you see it as like, okay, the market didn't like that. So you just see it as feedback. And that sounds kind of like a cliche thing, but you genuinely live that. Like you're like, okay, they didn't like it, or it didn't really pick up in this way. Maybe the next time I do it, it picks up and there's a bit more momentum. I will say just one thing, because the way you've done it is like as edge of the internet as it gets, right? Like you're literally using NFTs where people already know you. Like even the phrase you used, was it like performance art or something?
Non-Fungible performance art.
Yeah, that's an incredible name and it kind of works. Obviously on the lower end, you've got like Upwork and Fiverr and stuff like that, where you can go and hire a designer, a video editor, or whatever. And that is already an active marketplace where, you know, it's fairly liquid. But I think the way you're doing it here is obviously very different. And you're doing it in a place where that is your resume. Like you said, like people are following you. It's going out to the people that have seen your resume for 2-3 years by this point. And they're seeing those thousands and thousands of like, you know, reps basically, instead of, hey, I'm looking for a designer, send me your portfolio. Right. It's like you've been showing your portfolio and now, and it takes honestly quite a lot of, I hate to use this phrase, but like bravery just to put yourself on the lowest reserve when it could have been a disaster. Yeah. And it might have been like, it might hurt your ego a bit and you're like, oh man, that's kind of a bit shit. But like now publicly people can see and they're like, all right, for one day's worth of work, the market bid 10, 12 grand or whatever it was. And if I'm going to hire Jack for the day, that's the minimum I'm probably going to have to spend. You've probably charged even more than that, I'm sure. So it's just, I think it's a great way to do it, man.
It's pretty fascinating. I think maybe it's the crypto thing. Like eBay is an auction site, right? eBay, you can place bids on stuff and run an auction. But for whatever reason, this behavior, like you're meeting culture where it is as well, because like auctions for NFTs are of the moment. That's what I've been doing and talking about. So it feels like a natural
evolution of it.
Natural evolution, but I'm also slicing the market up massively by doing that, right? Like how many people following that have even an Ethereum wallet with Ethereum in it? It's not a lot.
That's true. Yeah, it's like the pre-qualified percentage is small. And then I did like you also added, if you don't have Ethereum to do this, you can also retweet the first tweet, I think, and you're giving one slot.
Yeah.
Which is great. I think just as an experiment, I think it's great. And like you've done a lot of these before. Like I think you showed one where you did the crowdsource Figma thing, where a bunch of people are designing stuff. Because look, man, like you've made obviously a great amount of money from NFTs and all the work you've done. But I love on that flip side, you'll just do something. Most of the time, it's just for the fun of it. And naturally, you make a good amount of money from it because that's your value. But like on the flip side, you'll happily give someone time. You'll do something for free. And I think you're doing it the right way, man. Because
thank you, mate.
It's a new way to show people how to monetize, like you said.
Yeah, I'll go back to what you said about like let the market decide and get free feedback and stuff. That's definitely not like, I don't brush that off as like, oh, who cares? Like if I did that and like nobody bid on it, it would have been freaking brutal. It would have been like, this sucks.
Has this happened much before where you've recently put something out and you're like, oh, you thought it was going to really pop and it didn't?
I was talking to David.
It sounds like Creator Lab now, but it's all right. It's just been you for a minute.
No, it's good. I was talking to David Perel about this the other day. And it's like, there is no correlation between the amount of time you spend or how good you think something is and how it's received. And that's just like just a ridiculous shift in mentality where you, in the same way that like the Google algorithm makes a decision, like you might have spent forever building this pre-roll ad that you think is hilarious. And then you put it out to market and they're like, this is shit. Everyone skips it in the first 1
feedback.
second.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, that's the funny thing. It's like, and it's quite demoralizing for the person who's doing it. But that's a good reminder to be like, the market doesn't care. Like I've said this about my podcast before, right? Like sometimes I'll spend hours and hours creating the best clip and writing out this summary, and I'll literally record something for 10 seconds, which is a picture of us on Zoom, and it will like fly because people saw the authentic side or like, you know, the natural side. It doesn't feel rehearsed, and you just don't know until you keep putting stuff out. And like you said, market decides, you know, so you kind of have to just put it out there.
And I think the function of these digital markets is like, if the market doesn't like it, nobody sees it. And that's another like interesting thing for people to get their head around. So you can look at, say you write 2 tweets or you post 2 products, one gets X number of impressions, one gets another, and it literally disappears from Twitter or wherever else if it doesn't hit. But the way you think about that cognitively is like, everybody's going to see that this isn't performing. The opposite is actually true. Like Twitter is making an assessment based on the first 100 people they show it to, and then they're going to bury it, which is an interesting like cognitive thing that you can't quite get your head around because you're staring at it like, man, this didn't hit, it didn't work. More often than not, like I'll ask people like, oh, do you see that thing I did that was like, that sucked? They're like, what? I've never, like the people that you would think was getting every single thing you post.
I feel the same about this podcast sometimes because like you, obviously you and Trung have hundreds of thousands of people following you. And like, you know, we've talked about this on the pod before, but as soon as you share an external link on Twitter, most people don't see it. Yeah. And the amount of times we've obviously been sharing out for some time, and what you'll find now is people comment and be like, oh, I had no idea you guys were doing this. And that's just because of the algorithm, right? And, you know, over time, more and more people see it and they like put 2 and 2 together. But that's another thing where, like, back to your point earlier about the amount of people that see it, influences everything, obviously. And sometimes it doesn't mean like, no investment advice is a bad idea because the first tweet we put out, it didn't get a million retweets, right? It was, oh, okay. So you're kind of still dependent on the algorithm in that case. But I think what the skill is to take that small sample size and say, out of the people who saw it, what was the feedback like?
100%.
And the way I see it with a podcast specifically is, were there enough people that love this? Because it's like, if people just like it, it's not enough because there's too many podcasts and it's a big ask. You have to ask people to listen to an hour. It's not just a tweet that you're going to like or retweet. So I think I've felt like that with my podcast and then obviously this, what we've done together. So you have to be able to like separate, okay, this isn't flying like a Trung thread, but the people who are messaging us are listening to this for an hour and a half, and we know like every week it's growing and every week more people are telling us how much they like it.
Another thing I'll say on that is it's behaviorally, there are different things, right? Like people will interact with and amplify something that is like a social signal for them in a lot
that's a great point.
In a lot of instances. So like, I think one of the reasons Visualize Value is successful in reaching more people is that image is like, oh, that philosophy or that idea resonates with me and I want to broadcast that, versus like I'm listening or like I've just bought this thing from this person. Far fewer people are going to share a behavior like that than they are like, here's this like, joke that I found funny, or here's this idea that I value. And, great marketing, you can do both at the same time, but you're not going to get 100% hit rate. But I think that's another thing to take into consideration when you're evaluating this stuff. You're reaching a lot of people, but the behaviors are going to be different depending on the context, the ask, all of these different things. And links, as we know, are just getting absolutely decimated because Twitter is trying to build their own world, right? You go on the internet. They want to keep you there. They're bringing, I think I just saw they're launching e-com like in Twitter. So you can put stores and products in your profile. So it's just going like every one of these social, it's almost going back to the AOL days, gardens. Right? Yeah, AOL, where it's like you go in and you're in AOL and that's it. That's where you spend your time. And Facebook's trying to do that. Twitter's trying to do that. Google's trying to do that. It's pretty fascinating stuff.
Mental, man. Well, anyway, congrats on that. That's a cool experiment, man. Was there anything else on that before we...
No, man, that was fun. Hopefully people that were listening could follow along, because I know we had a few visual cues there, but we'll put a link in the video as well.
Yeah, you can check out the auction as well. But yeah, Jack, that was really cool to hear all the breakdown, man. I want to see more experiments like this. I think we could probably do some sort of experiments with NIA as well. I think the Telegram is already one, which has been pretty... already kind of exceeded my expectations. It's not like a million people in there, but the people in there seem to be really liking it. And so that's pretty fun. But I think there's more stuff we can maybe do with live stuff, merch we've talked about, maybe NFTs. Like there's plenty of stuff for us
so much fun stuff, man,
to try out. But all right, anything else before we close out, mate?
No, thanks to everyone for listening. I think we're getting up there, aren't we? What episode is this?
I think it's like the 16th, 17th one we've recorded, if you include number one.
We're going to be in the top 1% of podcasts in a few episodes time.
I know, in 22, yeah.
Good times, man. No, always a pleasure, mate. Thank you.
Yeah, this was great. All right, well, thanks again. If you made it all the way to the end, let us know. And like, subscribe, share. Write us a review on Apple if you can. That would be great. Join the Telegram group, listen in. And as always, if you take any of this as investment advice, it is not investment advice. And we will see you next week for some more unqualified opinions.
Thank you, guys.
See you next week.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.